Marcus Wilson, a software engineer in his early 30s, lived in the suburban town of Riverside, where leafy maple trees lined the streets and red brick houses exuded a tranquil atmosphere. On a sweltering Saturday evening in early July, the sun was still high. Its rays angled across the neighborhood, casting golden streaks onto the lush green lawns. Marcus had just returned from the office after a grueling week of nearly 60 hours of work. He loved designing software and was passionate about technology, but the heavy workload had drained him. The only solace he found on weekends was his cozy little house, which he had purchased 2 years ago. In the backyard, Marcus had invested much energy to create a personal oasis. Stone-paved walkways, purple lavender bushes, red rose beds, neatly trimmed shrubbery, and right at the center, a cool swimming pool. Though not very large, it was enough for him to soak in and relax during the scorching summer. That afternoon, Marcus wore black swim trunks and a light gray t-shirt. Stepping into the backyard, he inhaled the warm air tinged with jasmine, which he'd planted along the fence so that its intense fragrance would soothe him at night. He had planned to dive into the water to escape the heat. Before he could enjoy it, Marcus heard an odd noise at the back gate. At first he assumed it was Mrs. Parker's cat. She was known for taking in stray cats that often wandered around bird hunting. But the creak sounded heavier than a cat. He stopped, straining to listen. He could hear the faint voice of a child. Marcus felt both curiosity and mild annoyance. While he was on friendly terms with his neighbors, he valued his privacy, especially in his own backyard. He had even placed a private property no trespassing sign on the fence, but it seemed someone was ignoring it. Moving closer, Marcus noticed the old wooden gate was half ajar. Under the bright sun, he saw two individuals. A white woman in her 40s with a tan complexion, wearing a striking pink swimsuit that stood out starkly. Next to her was a boy around 10 years old, with brown hair and a slight build. Both of them were dripping wet, water forming a small puddle on the stone tiles around the pool. Marcus frowned, baffled. What on earth was going on? Why were they standing in his backyard, on private property? He approached them, trying to stay composed. "Excuse me, may I help you? This is my property. How did you get in here?" The woman, later identified as Harriet Stevenson, turned sharply. Her eyes flashed with anger rather than remorse. She planted her hands on her hips, lifted her chin, and showed no sign of apology. "I don't need your help. Yes, it's your property, so what? You're responsible because this pool is far too deep for my son. Toby nearly drowned. What were you thinking, creating such a death trap in a residential area?" Marcus was taken aback by her accusatory tone. He hadn't had time to respond before Harriet continued. "You must fix this pool immediately. Reduce its depth or install proper barriers. This is extremely irresponsible. You're lucky I haven't sued you yet for endangering a child." Marcus felt his anger rising. He drew a deep breath. How could someone trespass onto his land and then demand he fix his private pool? "Ma'am, you're trespassing. My pool is built according to safety regulations, with clear depth markings and a locked gate. No one should enter without permission. Your son shouldn't be here in the first place," he said, his tone firm. Harriet glared at him, narrowing her eyes in clear displeasure. Meanwhile, Toby, the boy, stood mute, staring at the ground as though anxious or ashamed. "Don't you dare talk to me like that. My son has every right to swim in any pool he wants, especially since he made an effort to come here. Who do you think you are?" Harriet raised her voice, showing utter disrespect. Marcus had reached his limit. "Please leave, right now. I don't want any trouble, but this is my home, my private property. Go." Harriet, fuming, seized her son's arm and marched away. As they left, she hollered, "Just you wait. I'm calling the police. You won't get away with this." Within 20 minutes, a white and blue Riverside Police Department cruiser pulled up in front of Marcus's home. Curious neighbors peeked out from their windows. Two officers stepped out of the patrol car. One was a tall man with brown hair named Officer Campbell. The other was a shorter woman named Officer Martinez. They approached Marcus's front door with solemn faces. "We received a report of threats and child endangerment at this address," Officer Campbell said curtly. Marcus invited them to the backyard to explain. He recounted the story of Harriet and Toby's trespassing, her outlandish accusations, and how she'd barged in without permission. He noticed, however, The officer still cast him a doubtful look, a disheartening but familiar feeling. Marcus, as a black man living in a predominantly white neighborhood, had grown accustomed to subtle biases. "Mr. Wilson," Officer Martinez said, "Mrs. Harriet Stevenson told a different story. She claims you intentionally built a dangerously deep pool to trap children. She says her son nearly drowned because of your negligence." Marcus could hardly believe his ears. He forced a wry smile. "A trap? That's absurd. The pool's on my private land, has a clear depth warning and a locked gate. She broke in. Why would I be at fault?" Officer Campbell maintained a neutral tone. "Mrs. Stevenson also alleges you were hostile and refused to cooperate. She says you intimidated her and her son. She even mentions you might have shown racial bias against them." Marcus let out a sardonic laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Racial bias? Against a white woman in my backyard? Me, a black man, being accused of that is downright ridiculous." Despite his frustration, Marcus knew he had to keep calm. Losing his temper would only worsen things. The officers decided to inspect the pool. Marcus led them around, showing them the marked depth, the warning sign, and the gate lock. Everything was indeed up to code, yet Officer Campbell remained firm. "We need you to come down to the station for further questioning. Mrs. Stevenson insists you recklessly endangered a child." Marcus bristled but nodded. He saw Harriet and Toby standing outside the fence, Harriet smirking triumphantly from a distance. Toby seemed withdrawn, arms folded, eyes lowered. "Fine," Marcus said, resigned but determined to clear his name. The Riverside police station was just 5 minutes from Marcus's home, but the short drive felt interminable. Memories of previous experiences, being unfairly suspected or treated differently because of his race, flashed through his mind. The interrogation room was small, cold, and unadorned, designed to isolate and unnerve. Officers Campbell and Martinez questioned him in turn. They seemed eager to find any inconsistencies that might incriminate him. Marcus remained collected, repeating the facts. "I mean no harm to the kid. I don't even know them. They entered without permission. I only told them to leave," he emphasized. They pressed him on details about the pool's depth, signage, and his attitude upon finding intruders. They asked if he had any prior personal disputes with Harriet. "No, I had never met her," Marcus insisted. After hours of questioning, Marcus grew fatigued. He requested a lawyer. Reluctantly, the officers agreed. About an hour later, Leah Brooks, Marcus's attorney, arrived. A 30-something black woman with a sharp intellect and a graceful bearing, she had defended many clients in civil rights cases throughout the city. "From this point on, my client will exercise his right to remain silent unless I am present," Leah declared. "If you want to press charges, produce evidence." Officer Martinez exchanged a quick radio call with her superior, then exhaled. "Fine. We'll need more time to investigate. For now, Mr. Marcus Wilson may leave, but we may need him for further questioning at any time." Marcus was released. Though relieved, he knew it wasn't over. Harriet was pursuing her accusations, and societal biases still lingered over him like a dark cloud. Returning home, Marcus walked straight to his backyard. The evening sun was setting, its golden glow blending into hues of orange and purple. The pool silently reflected the twilight, a testament to the tumult and frustration filling his mind. The thought haunted him. A complete stranger enters my home, accuses me, and expects me to pay for it? He wondered what his next move should be. Should I just wait for the police to decide? Marcus then called an old friend, David Reyes, a tech security specialist of Latin descent. David worked for a cybersecurity firm and had helped resolve numerous disputes by uncovering digital traces. "David, I need your help," Marcus said. "There's this woman named Harriet Stevenson who's causing trouble. I need to dig into her background. I'm sure she's not some innocent victim." David eagerly agreed, knowing Marcus to be a kind, respectful person. It felt wrong for him to be baselessly accused. Marcus recalled he had a security camera installed, covering the fence and the pool area. He quickly checked the footage. Sure enough, the video showed Harriet and Toby slipping through the gate. Toby appeared hesitant, but Harriet urged him forward. Clear evidence she was the one leading the trespassing. This footage would be invaluable. Marcus immediately sent a copy to Leah Brooks, along with a detailed statement. Leah was relieved. Excellent, Marcus. This is crucial evidence to refute Harriet's accusations. But she warned him that Harriet likely had more tricks up her sleeve. People who thrived on lawsuits rarely backed down easily. 2 days later, in the evening, Marcus was seated at his computer when his phone buzzed, displaying David's name. David's voice was urgent and excited. "Marcus, I found some very interesting information about Harriet Stevenson. You might be shocked." Within minutes, David sent a batch of files. Local news articles, old court documents, screenshots from Harriet's social media accounts, forming a long record of baseless lawsuits, defamation, and scams targeting minorities or wealthy business owners. Marcus read the files with a growing sense of dread. A newspaper article from 5 years ago reported Harriet accusing a Jewish doctor of discriminating against white female patients, demanding $200,000 in compensation. The court eventually dismissed the case, but not before the doctor spent a fortune in time and legal fees, suffering damage to his reputation. In another instance, Harriet claimed a Mexican restaurant was racist toward her, forcing the owner to close temporarily before the matter was resolved. Moreover, Harriet went by multiple aliases and frequently used threats and extortion to force out-of-court settlements. She rarely won official judgments, but walked away with tidy sums from settlement fees. Most disturbing was Harriet's file with Child Protective Services, CPS. Her son Toby, full name Tobias Stevenson, had been flagged for signs of neglect and abuse. Harriet had repeatedly evaded inspections by moving and by launching countersuits against social workers. Marcus felt his heart tighten. He recalled Toby's fearful expression. The boy's eyes hid trauma, as though accustomed to living amid abuse and lies. "David, I don't just want to clear my name, I want to help this kid," Marcus told him over the phone. David paused, then replied, "Send everything to Leah. We'll figure out how to notify the police and CPS." Marcus agreed, passing all the information to Leah with a note. "We must bring the truth to light." Leah Brooks swiftly took action. She arranged a meeting with the police, submitting the security footage showing Harriet trespassing, plus the documents David unearthed. Though the Riverside Police Department was initially hesitant, Leah's evidence of Harriet's prior scams and lawsuits made them investigate more thoroughly. Meanwhile, Harriet pressed her attack on social media. She posted stories accusing Marcus of racial bias and attempted murder. Some online users, unaware of the facts, rallied around Harriet, demanding justice for Toby. Marcus read these malicious comments with exasperation and helplessness. Family and friends consoled him, advising him to avoid social media until the storm passed. Leah reassured him that a court would rely on factual evidence, not social media hype. Days went by. One afternoon, Marcus received a short text from Leah. "Brace yourself. The police will arrest Harriet Stevenson." Marcus's heart pounded. It was happening more quickly than he'd expected. It turned out that, in addition to charges of fraud and defamation, Harriet was also under suspicion for child abuse. The police, working with CPS, decided to intervene swiftly to protect Toby. The next day, Marcus was sitting in his living room when he heard police sirens outside. He rushed to the window. On the street, 2 patrol cars had stopped in front of Harriet's rental house, just 4 doors down. Neighbors stepped out of their homes, whispering among themselves. Marcus saw Harriet open the door, stunned to find officers waving a warrant for her arrest. She began screaming, resisting, cursing. Toby stood behind her, trembling, tears on his pale cheeks. A female officer approached him gently, separating him from his mother, while 2 other officers handcuffed Harriet and led her to the car. Catching Marcus's gaze across the street, Harriet howled, "You'll pay for this. I'll never lose. Do you hear me?" But this time her eyes lacked their former arrogance. They showed only desperation and rage, like someone who had lost all control. Marcus stood there silently, simultaneously relieved that justice was coming, yet saddened for the child caught in his mother's mess. Toby was taken to CPS headquarters for questioning and temporary care. Marcus had no idea if Toby still feared or despised him. Through the boy's eyes, Marcus might have been the enemy, following his mother's narratives. A few days later, Marcus received a call from a social worker named Ms. Caldwell. She said Toby had recounted that he never wanted to enter Marcus's pool in the first place, but his mother forced him. When Marcus told Harriet to leave, Toby actually felt relieved because he didn't want to be there anymore. Ms. Caldwell also mentioned medical checkups revealed old bruises on Toby, signs of malnourishment, and recurring episodes of anxiety. CPS would keep him in protective care until a permanent solution was found: placement in a foster or adoptive home if Harriet was convicted and lost custody. Marcus's chest tightened at the thought. He recalled Toby's sorrowful gaze, how the boy seemed to yearn for compassion. He couldn't imagine the years of abuse Toby had endured. Although Harriet was in custody, the formal allegations against Marcus had not been fully dismissed. She stubbornly insisted Marcus had designed a dangerous pool, threatened her son, and so on. As absurd as it was, Marcus still needed a court decision to fully exonerate him. At the preliminary hearing, Harriet appeared haggard but still furious. Her lawyer, a portly man who seemed reluctant to defend her, faced overwhelming evidence of her fraudulent activities and smear campaigns. Marcus's side, led by Leah, presented the security footage, official documents proving the pool's compliance with local regulations, and a record of Harriet's previous scams. The judge listened gravely. Mrs. Harriet Stevenson faces charges of trespassing, defamation, and fraud. We have also received notice from the district attorney concerning child endangerment. As for Mr. Marcus Wilson, we find no basis for criminal charges. That declaration left Marcus breathing a sigh of relief. He glanced at Harriet, seeing raw panic in her expression. Toby, who wasn't allowed in the courtroom, remained in CPS's care. The preliminary hearing concluded. Marcus was free to go. Harriet stayed in custody to await further proceedings on fraud, child abuse, and more. Time passed, and Harriet's case garnered attention in the local press. Nicknamed the Odd Pool lawsuit, it soon shifted focus to Harriet's dark history of scams and child abuse. Marcus became a reluctant local celebrity. Journalists requested interviews, wanting his perspective on the man who exposed the neighborhood con artist. At first, he felt awkward. He preferred a private life. But Leah suggested he use this platform to share the truth and oppose prejudice. "All I did was defend my property," Marcus said during a local TV interview. "I built this pool for my own relaxation, not to trap anyone. I hope Toby gets real justice for everything he's gone through." Many Riverside residents, initially swayed by Harriet's claims, now rallied behind Marcus. They praised him for staying composed and law-abiding in the face of false allegations. Outrage was directed at Harriet, especially as Toby's abuse was confirmed. After the DA dropped all charges against Marcus, the Riverside Police Department officially apologized. Officer Martinez and Officer Campbell visited in person to deliver a letter admitting they had not thoroughly verified initial information. Marcus accepted their apology with a sense of relief. He understood the pressure on law enforcement, but hoped they'd handle similar situations more carefully in the future, without letting bias guide them. As for Toby, after being separated from Harriet, he remained at a CPS facility for a few weeks. Marcus wasn't sure if it was appropriate to visit. Toby might still be traumatized. Eventually, he discussed it with Ms. Caldwell. "I'm worried Toby might still be afraid or resent me," Marcus said. "But if he wants to see me, I'm willing." One Sunday afternoon, Ms. Caldwell called. "Toby asked about you. He wants to know if you hate him." I told him you absolutely do not. Marcus stood silently, heart aching for the poor child. "I'll come if Toby's okay with it." That same afternoon, Marcus drove to the CPS center, bringing some cookies and children's books, hoping Toby might enjoy them. The boy sat waiting in a small common room, wearing a plain white t-shirt and worn-out jeans, his brown hair unruly. Marcus entered. Toby looked up, apprehension in his eyes. "You're not mad at me?" Toby asked, barely above a whisper. Marcus smiled gently, taking a seat. "No, Toby. I know you didn't want any of this. I just hope you're doing better." Toby nodded quietly, tears welling in his eyes. He explained that his mother always shouted at him, blaming him for her troubles. He'd been hungry, poorly clothed, and constantly bearing the brunt of her anger whenever she lost a lawsuit or was rejected. Marcus's chest tightened with empathy. He offered Toby a children's book about a lonely dog searching for friends, hoping it might bring some comfort. A few months later, Harriet Stevenson's official trial began. The court had consolidated the many charges: fraud, child abuse, forging documents, and defamation. Additionally, video evidence showed her trespassing and falsely accusing Marcus. Harriet kept denying everything, shouting about how black men and immigrants were out to get her. The prosecutor calmly presented an arsenal of evidence. Under scrutiny, Harriet's lies unraveled swiftly. The jury deliberated only a few hours before returning a verdict. Harriet was guilty of fraud, child endangerment, and related offenses. She received a lengthy prison sentence and permanently lost custody of Toby. As the sentence was read, Harriet collapsed in tears, but no one in the courtroom sympathized. Marcus and Leah, seated in the gallery, exchanged relieved nods. Justice had finally prevailed. After the trial, Toby officially entered foster care with the possibility of adoption. The following weeks, he stayed with a temporary foster family. He struggled to adjust, a new routine, a new school, and new notions of love and stability he had never known. Marcus kept in touch with Toby through Ms. Caldwell. He was surprised to receive a few handmade drawings from the boy. Pictures of a house with a pool, depicting Toby standing beside a smiling black man. The note read, "Thank you, Mr. Marcus." Marcus felt tears in his eyes. He realized that every hardship he'd endured was worth it if this child was finally safe. In Riverside, people now spoke of Marcus Wilson as a hero who stood up to injustice. Initially, he was merely a victim of a blatant smear campaign, but his determination to expose Harriet and help Toby had made him a symbol. As a successful black man in a neighborhood filled with subtle biases, Marcus had asserted his rights and dignity. He received invitations to community events where he spoke about overcoming trauma and injustice. Though never seeking fame, Marcus embraced these opportunities to raise awareness. He recognized not everyone would be fortunate enough to have a competent lawyer or high-tech security footage. Through these talks, Marcus spread the message. Don't remain silent when you're falsely accused or discriminated against. Speak up. Justice can be slow, but it's a light that cannot be extinguished. A few months later, Marcus hosted a small backyard gathering. Close friends, co-workers, Leah, and David all attended. They grilled food, chatted, and enjoyed games by the pool. That day the sky was clear, the sunshine warm and gentle. The lavender and rose bushes had passed their peak bloom, but their mild fragrance lingered, recalling the eventful summer. Instead of tension, peace and laughter prevailed. Marcus silently reflected on the turmoil he'd faced. Being escorted by police, doubted because of his race, nearly losing his reputation and career. In the end, he was vindicated, and a dangerous fraud was unmasked. Most importantly, a young boy escaped an abusive environment. At one point, Leah Brooks proposed a toast. Here's to Marcus. He stood firmly for justice and never wavered, not just for himself, but also for Toby. May that boy find a brighter future. Everyone raised their glasses. Marcus gazed at their supportive faces, at the sparkling pool water, feeling a deep contentment. Before long, Toby found a truly caring adoptive family. According to Ms. Caldwell, he was settling in well, attending school regularly with decent grades. Each summer, Toby sent Marcus a letter telling him about new friends and adventures. Marcus returned to his busy life of software design, often working late. But he knew that whenever he came home, his backyard and pool would be there for him. Once the source of so much trouble, that pool had now become a symbol of resilience and hope. One summer evening, Marcus took a quiet dip in the pool. Warm air clung to his skin, while the jasmine's sweet perfume drifted in the breeze. Memories flashed through his mind. Harriet's smug grin, her hysterical screams at her arrest, Toby's fearful tears, and later his cautious smile when he realized he wasn't hated. All of it could be encapsulated in one word: justice. Despite the world's many injustices and the existence of other Harriets out there, Marcus believed in the power of truth and unwavering spirit. One person can make a difference if they stand their ground. He submerged himself, letting the cool blue water envelop his body. Coming up for air, he looked skyward at the fading sunlight, an orange glow sinking beyond the horizon, soon to be replaced by a canopy of stars. Like life itself, after darkness, light returns. He smiled, whispering softly, "Everything will be all right. We all deserve a fair chance." It was a promise to himself, to Toby, and to anyone who needed faith that, while justice may sometimes arrive late, it eventually wins.